and blind. For whether is greater the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift. Whoso therefore shall swear by the altar sweareth by it, and by all things thereon. And whoso shall swear by the temple sweareth by it, and by him that dwelleth therein. And he that shall swear by heaven sweareth by the throne of God, and by him that sits thereon. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe of mint.
Good morning, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies, and we're continuing in Hosea 10. Some equipment issues this morning, and Hosea 10. What am I talking about? Hosea 7. Hosea 7, verse 1. Where did I pull that 10 up from? All right. Okay. I really gotta do something about that. All right. Anyways, let's get the scripture up and begin. So we talked about verse 1 a little bit, right? We read verses 1 through 3, but then we only got through the first half of 1, which was when I would have healed Israel, then the iniquity of Ephraim was discovered, and the wickedness of Samaria. There's another scripture in the book of Isaiah, it says, your iniquities have separated between you and your God. And that, there have been probably about 1,000, 100,000, or 100 million, I don't know, tracts, the tracts they hand out to people. And people want to, you don't know how to preach the gospel, so here's a little piece of paper, and you can hand it to somebody. And that can certainly be useful, and I've no doubt that they've done good. So, no complaints on that. But I'm just saying, it's probably, it's the verse that launched 1,000 tracts. Because, that's I can think of the cartoon imagery already. I remember it'd be like, they'd show like, a chasm. You're on the edge of one precipice and on the other side, and there's a chasm that you can't cross. And chasm was sin, and you're on one side and God's on the other. And then they drop a cross between there, making a bridge over to the other side of the chasm. And as often it's been done, it's true that because, our sins get in the way. And what Christ does for us is he takes our sin out of the way. What I think what a lot of people fail to understand about Christianity is the fact that the story doesn't end there. Your salvation is assured from before the foundation of the world in God. But in my heart, I don't feel fully assured until I see the fruits of God's work in me. That's for me. If you feel assured, and this is kind of facetious, but if one can feel assured, or what I would say is this: if you feel comfortable assuring someone of their salvation, despite the fact that they have so little regard for the Lord, that they have no Christian growth, that they have nothing more than a declaration of faith and professed belief in the heart. If you feel comfortable assuring them, oh yes, and nothing more you need. Because it's I have lots of things I need personally, I don't know if God needs them, but I need them. I want them. You know what I mean? And I feel that it is the Spirit of God active in my life that brings this desire to me. And I've heard this said this way, that you wouldn't want to sin. Well, I wanted to sin. I wanted to stop. And most of all, I wanted to stop wanting to. Because there's nothing more annoying than forcing, not annoying, but there are a few things less pleasant in life than trying to resist something that you really want to do. Or maybe not really want to do, but that you feel driven to do. I don't know how many times people have told me that I felt driven to do it. I felt I had to do it. It was just, I felt like they were just caught up in the moment, and they just did what they did, even though they knew that they probably shouldn't. For they commit falsehood, and the thief cometh in, and the troop of robbers spoileth without. And he likened the troop of robbers to the priest. I don't know if he's still thinking in that analogy from chapter 6. It's not an analogy, actually. It was a simile. I don't know if he's thinking in that simile still. I think it's probably both literal and metaphorical. Because, and people know this, and it's like, I feel like over and over in history, humans have this argument. Because there will be people who will say, look, if we turn a blind eye to the sin in our midst, worse things will come. And people say, nah, no way. I think it's funny. I notice people, I'll see people like on YouTube or something, and they'll be talking about the marriage issue, right? Which shouldn't be an issue, but since it is, I can just say that without getting specific, because I certainly don't want any algorithm to spy my video and flag me for some reason. But the marriage issue, right? And I see people saying, like, see, the world didn't fall apart, as though it would happen in a day, as though you let that happen, and then just in a mere course of weeks or years, everything's crumbling. But it hasn't taken long for it to get awfully weird. And I never approved of that at all, and I still don't. But I said one of the reasons why we had it is because of the past intolerance that was afforded towards people who then felt the necessity of forcing us to accept their lawful union. They wanted to make it lawful because we tried to make it unlawful. Not me, but but in general, religious and conservative folks, you wanted to do that. So there's a degree to which you repress something too hard and it comes flying out at you. But there's another way in which, by not repressing some things that are, it's like, you have some sins in society, they come about and then it becomes rampant, and then crime and other things follow. It's like, and I'm trying to, this is more of like just what I'm getting from this verse, not from any sort of scientific study in criminology or anything, but like, they'll say, oh, if we bring in this casino into town or something like that, that's gonna cause a rise in crime. And I don't know what the studies are, but I bet it does. I just bet it does. It's like, there's a weird line between like, absolute prohibition, like they had prohibition of alcohol in the 20s, led to some pretty crazy crime because you can't totally hold things back. But on the other hand, if you let it get too, if your town is full of bars, like literally if you like promote, like say give all kinds of tax breaks to try to attract lots of bars and and your town becomes the bar capital of the local area, you're going to have more bar fights and bar brawls and all kinds of other issues, people drunken in the streets. It's going to, and then what that attracts people who prey on drunks or on people who are coming and going from gambling establishments. Crooked businessmen invite also criminals, because it's like, I know how it feels. Like when I go to a bank and I feel like I've been ripped off, which has happened to me on a number of occasions, where I felt like it wasn't just like, oh, I made a mistake and they're charging me fees. No, I felt like their system was rigged in such a way that they'd gotten me unawares or whatever. But what I'm saying is, like, it causes me, walking away from that situation, to have some very negative and even violent thoughts about banks in general. Certainly not necessarily the people who work there, but the structures, the businesses. You feel very negative about it. So let's say you have a town and the local grocer is, he's got a monopoly and charges very high prices. But how can he help it? He's in a high-risk neighborhood, So, because who else will bring groceries to that place except someone? These prices are going to be higher. Why? Because he's got more shoplifting. He's got more people stealing. But that in turn breeds more resentment at the high prices, which in turn hardens people and makes them more willing to commit crimes against. When you feel like someone's being unjust, it's a lot easier to justify in your mind doing something against them that might be illegal. Like if you feel like, I could see someone walking into like a store and feeling like they charge so much and it's such a ripoff, and and thereby justifying, well, if they're stealing from people, there's nothing wrong with stealing from them. So when the nation is filled with iniquity and sin and wickedness, falsehood, it breeds crime. It breeds all kinds of things that are detrimental to society. You think about all the big cities and the way they get worse in many ways. It's like there's something, it starts with corruption in government and it trickles its way down. When you go dealing with the government and it's corrupt and you have to bribe your way and like you can't get services and stuff, it makes people resentful and feel justified in not playing along with the system. All right, I'm going to stop going on about that. That's enough of that. And they consider not in their hearts that I remember all their wickedness. Now their doings have beset them about. They are before my face. People think, hey, my sin is behind me. And I don't mean like it's covered with the blood of Jesus. They're just, oh, that was so long ago. That was so long. That was months ago, years ago that I did that. I did that sin a while ago. That was so long, I don't even feel like it's the same person anymore, but it was ages ago, And I understand you feel, I think about the things I did in my youth, and I feel very separate from them. Like without reference to the blood of Christ. I just feel like that was so long ago. I feel so estranged from the person I was back then. I mean? I've changed so much has changed in my life. Just it's like childhood. When you live long enough, when you're in your 20s, childhood isn't that far. Well, childhood will probably seem kind of far away. But like your early 20s are not that far removed from your late 20s. But even so, even things that happened just a couple of years ago, we have a tendency to think like, well, that's not a current issue. That was a couple of years ago. Some wicked thing we did. And we want to think that time makes sin go away, but it doesn't. Time does not make sin go away. The only thing that makes sin go away is the blood of Christ. And I don't know that he has that necessarily in mind, but it's certainly worth mentioning. You know what I mean? Because I think that's the attitude is like, oh, that was so long ago. Some crimes, they've decided, even in society, it's like, yeah, there's a statute of limitations. Like I can sit up here and talk about getting away with stealing when I was 12. I can sit up here and talk about lies I told when I was a kid or even a young adult. And no, it's not going to be, even for people who aren't Christians, it's not going to be a great scandal, because it's been so long. But the thing is, it's like, I never answered for many of these things. And from God's perspective, we are who we are, embedded in history. God is eternal, like he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And that's the perspective from which he looks at everything. Your life is not a point moving forward. You know what I mean? It's not just now. It's who you've always been. That's why salvation is from before the foundation of the world. God looks at us not based on who we are at any given moment, but our whole life from beginning to end is what determines who we are. And though, I'll tell you what, it is a forward-looking thing, because it's not how you begin, but how you end up. You know what I mean? Like your life is a whole story. But the thing is, our sin and iniquity doesn't just go away. I say the blood of Jesus, but there's an underlying cause. That's the grace and mercy of God. Because even in the Old Testament, it's because people say, oh, Paul, what about Ezekiel? It says, if a man turn from his iniquity, I will remember it no more. Yeah, but then, well, here's the thing. I will remember it no more if they turn. But this isn't talking necessarily you turn. It's just, you just think it's just, well, it's, it's not to be, it's just something that happened. Nobody saw it. It was done in secret. The time we this has nothing to do with me. The time when we laid in wait along the road and, conked that guy over the head and stole all his goods, and we left him alive. I mean, surely the Lord, nobody saw it, nobody cares. And surely that was something that's, but they don't think, I don't think it's necessarily they think God doesn't remember. They're just not thinking of God enough to realize he remembers. The world may not know. They say in their hearts, as it says in Isaiah 29, who sees us and who knows us? They think, who sees us? Who knows us? No one sees our doings. No one knows what we're really about. No one knows the wicked thoughts of my heart. They don't consider that God remembers all. Now their doings have beset them round about there before my face. See, their doings are all around them. They didn't get rid of them. They are just all around them, and they're for me, they're right there, present and accounted for, as if it was just as fresh as the morning dew. It just happened. From God's perspective, God is eternal. He's got this eternal perspective. Your limited lifetime is a moment. You know what I mean? It is your limited lifetime might as well be a point in space and time. Your year since you did that horrible thing that isn't even measurable from when you compare it to the infinite expanse of the time frame in which God operates. It's insignificant. They make the king glad with their wickedness, and the princes with their lies. Oh yes, how it pleases the king. The princes would be other political leaders. It's not just the king's sons, lesser nobles and such. I'm saying that the word, as I recall, it does not mean a king's son. Because, like, you remember, like, even in our language, Machiavelli's The Prince wasn't, a king is a prince. It is one who, I don't even know what prince means in English. Like, what is the underneath word of that? Anyways, it's not essential to know. What it's saying is the political leaders are pleased in their wickedness. Now, maybe not all. I say no one likes to have bands of robbers, right? But they do like to have bands of priests acting as robbers. One of the things I remember, I forget if it was the Communist Manifesto or Karl Marx himself or some other person in the communist, like, panoply, whether it be Lenin or Stalin, who said that religion is the opiate of the masses. And I've heard someone say that atheism is the opiate of the masses, but that's neither here nor there. I don't think so. It certainly is like an opiate, because the thought of that God is real has a way of focusing the mind. But religion can be used to deaden the senses. It's not like the idea that believing in God suddenly desensitizes you to reality. I guess the idea is that, like, people think they're going to heaven, so they don't care about their earthly situation. Only if that's the way the religion is presented to them. If, like, I don't know anywhere in the New Testament where it says, like, you're going to heaven, so your life doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, as far as, like, it doesn't matter what goes on in your life because you're going to heaven. That is the way people are manipulated. There's a lot of things in Scripture that are used to manipulate people's minds and to get them to think in a certain way that is not beneficial to them. The reason we have so many denominations is because the Scriptures can be manipulated. And it's just something you have to deal with. There's very little in this world that can't be manipulated, as far as in terms of words. Words can be manipulated and turned and twisted. I mean, God knows if you don't believe that, you know what I mean? I don't think anyone listening to me believes that, but doesn't believe, doesn't believe that words can be manipulated. But, I've been accused of that numerous times, So if I can do it, then I'm definitely not the only one who can do it. I'm just saying, if someone can see what I do as a form of manipulation, and I agree wholeheartedly. It just depends on, because manipulation is like a word that doesn't, like I'm taking this pen and I'm manipulating it. In fact, when I write, I'm manipulating it, right? Doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. It means I'm using my hands, mis manos, to manipulate, to handle, to move, to use my hands to make it, to cause to function. Now I can take this I can manipulate this in a position where I can stab someone in the eye with it. It's not exactly the intended use. So manipulate, when I say that, I will, I don't always have like a negative connotation, though it has a strong negative connotation, sort of like an agenda. Oh, he has an agenda. It's like, oh, great, now we know what we're doing. I love going into something like this with an agenda, because God forbid we should show up and then we're sitting around wondering, well, what's next? An agenda is perfect. It'll lay out, all right, 9 a.m. coffee, 9:15, we're going to start the meeting. 10 o'clock, we break for donuts or whatever. I don't know. Point is, an agenda is a useful thing, and so is manipulation. It's all in how you do it. Do you do it conscientiously through the Holy Spirit? Picking up the word, examining it? Examine the word. Examine yourselves. Without manipulating the word, I don't know how you're going to look at it from all the different angles it needs to be looked at to fully understand it. It's not that there are so many different meanings in the word. What I'm saying is words have so many meanings that sometimes you have to look at it in different lights to be able to understand which meaning is the correct one for the context that you're in. If you don't take time to really turn it and look at it, it's not necessarily going to be clear. So how do the princes become glad? Well, for one, like I said, the company of priests lying in wait. That idea, bands of robbers as a literal thing is not something a king's going to be happy with, because that's something he has to take care of. But part of the wickedness of Israel was that the people were led astray. The king set up the golden calf and said, these are your gods that led you up out of the land of Egypt, O Israel. So you don't have to go up to Jerusalem anymore. In fact, I forbid it. And the people, when they obey this, and they hearken to the priests that he appoints, as it was written, Jeroboam appointed of the most base people of priests. He just found people to become priests who were charlatans and rip-off artists, kind of like we have on TV. And have had since I was a child, and probably before that. Those are the guys that show up first, probably. And so they become the priests, and they lead people astray, and the people commit wickedness. They follow after the schema of the priests, obeying the thing that God has forbidden, and thereby gladden the king. Ah, yes. Even today, yes, we're glad to celebrate and proud to celebrate the things that are going on. The rulers don't care about sin and the righteousness of the people. They just care that the people are content. And if the people are contented with sin, then so be it. You think about the Romans had that saying about bread and circuses, right? They would put on spectacles to satiate the bloodlust of the people. They'd throw all these criminals in there and then sick the lions on them, or have them trampled by beasts. And people would sit around and watch. This is exciting. Let's see a spectacle. Let's see someone torn apart by an animal. And as the people cheer and get excited and the king is pleased, all right, people are happy. That's what I want. I want people to be happy. And if you think about the laws, don't care much about your righteousness or your sinful state. They're meant to please people. That's you could say a lot about. There's an argument to be made for making divorce easy, because Paul said if an unbeliever wants to depart, let him go. So as far as I'm concerned, if I'm married to an unbeliever and they want to divorce me, I don't want them to have to jump through 1,000 hoops. Fine, go, right? But on the other hand, the reason they do this is because they want to make it easy, because men are sinful. As Jesus said concerning the law of divorce, that Moses wrote it for the hardness of your hearts. But if the people are glad in their sins, the king is even gladder, because it's one more thing he doesn't have to worry about. They're all adulterers, as an oven heated by the baker, who ceaseth from raising after he hath kneaded the dough, until it be leavened. Oh, yes. There's an analogy we can understand, I hope, but I'll explain it. They're all adulterate as a hot oven. An oven. It's basically a metaphor for the female sex organ, essentially, right? And what about the leavened dough raising? Is for the male organ. Very simple. You know, it's like the dough grows. It's got to be inserted in the oven. The oven is hot. They're all adulterers as the oven heated by a baker. They're all ready. They're all hot and ready to go. Ready to have the bread inserted. You know? As far as the who ceaseth from raising after he hath kneaded the dough until it be leavened. Meaning, I don't know if you've ever done raising bread, but you knead it, and then you add the leaven, and you give it, you knead it, and then you let it raise, right? But eventually it's ready to go. You know, what it's saying is like, he ceases from raising after he has kneaded the dough until it be leavened. What it's saying is, you might say that it is fully leavened. Who ceases from raising the dough when it's leavened. Until could also be, in English we would say like when. I wonder what the Devil's Translation says about this. Before I get to, sometimes I feel like I'm like, oh, I've struck on it, and I assumed the meaning. We'll go. Let's try the American Standard Version first. It's going to be pretty much similar, I think. He ceaseth to stir the fire from kneading of the dough until it be leavened. That's weird. Ceases to stir the fire. Well, because it's hot enough. Okay, I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to bring that over for you so you could see too. This is the American Standard Version. They're all adulterers. There is an oven heated by the baker. He ceases to stir the fire. He ceaseth to raise is probably, and they assume raise means like raise the fire or raise the temperature by stirring the fire. You know, I know that in the King James the words are going to be literally, he ceases from raising. And raise means to rouse or wake. And I would say, by the way, to rouse or awake is another word that we even use to this day, referring to sexual interest being roused, right, or awakened. So it's like, you know, but he ceases, the oven's hot. And so he stops heating it. He stops stirring it up. See, it's from the kneading of the dough. He ceases to rouse. I don't know. I do think this rousing. I don't know. To me, I see it more connected to the dough than to the oven. But let's see what the NIV, the Devil's Translation, which is going to be thought for thought. They are all adulterers, burning like an oven, whose fire the baker need not stir. See, they put that not in. Because they stop. Well, because they cease from. But the need, that's not in the Hebrew. Need not. From the kneading of the dough until it rises. They all insist that the word from is part of this. I mean, I guess that's not negotiable. Every translation has from. I think their translations actually sound more awkward than the King James, which is funny because they're supposed to be more modern. So anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. He ceases, whatever. The oven's hot enough. The bread is big enough. It's all ready. You know, it's like what it's saying is they're all adulterers, hot and ready to engage in their adultery. And the analogy, I'm going to go on because this is going to be brought up a little further, right? In the day of our king, the princes have made him sick with bottles of wine. He stretched out his hand with scorners. For they have made ready their heart like an oven, whilst they lie in wait. Their baker sleepeth all the night. In the morning it burneth as a flaming fire. They are all hot as an oven, and have devoured their judges. All their kings are fallen, and there is none among them that calleth unto me. There's a lot of little baking analogies going on in every one of these verses. Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. He is a cake not turned. And then even more. But we can't keep going on verses without talking about them. So, we could, but... So, the adultery here, it's like I said, a lot of this is like a double analogy. First to literal adultery, and then to idolatry. But then to all kinds of other things, sin. Because adultery is put for idolatry, and idolatry for other sin. Because the chief sin of worshiping another god leads them to other sins. Because if you don't have the right God, you're not going to have the right moral standard. See, people say you can have morals without God, and don't ever argue that you can't. Of course you can. But you don't have the right morals. In fact, even you'll get people, they'll go to the Bible and they'll argue that the Bible is immoral, that the teachings of they'll argue the immorality of God. I mean, that's what someone was telling me. They were trying to say, well, the Bible may have some interesting historical blah, 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 but morality, you can't rely on it for moral teachings. I thought it's funny because it's like, if I was going to toss out anything, it would be all the historical mumbo-jumbo and stick to the moral stuff. And it's like, and of course they don't know how to read it as a Christian would from the New Testament perspective. And they'll just go right to the passage about stoning virgins. Do you think virgins should be stoned? It's like, if they were promised to somebody else, yeah. If you agreed to marry someone, and then, meaning that's, when I say should be, I'm not saying. Jesus says, let him that is without sin cast the first stone. There's a lot of things I think are worthy of stoning, so to speak, of being put to death. A lot of things. That's not saying I believe that that such a sentence ought to be carried out. What I say is, yes, that is the proper measure of the gravity of that sin. That is a great sin. You know what I mean? It's a big sin. It should be a huge taboo, a massive no-no. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like they'll say, well, do you think adulterers should be stoned? There's all these things. It's like they're a call for the death penalty, and it's like, well, that's the gravity of that sin. Adultery is a serious sin. And if you don't consider it so, then, if that's not very serious, then everything after is a little less serious too, is it not? You know what I mean? It's like, because you don't suddenly say, oh, well, all adultery is no different than, what would be a lesser sin? Well, you would lower it saying looking at pornography, adultery, they're the same. Or speaking evil of someone, it's the same. It's just as severe as actually committing adultery. You know what I mean? If you don't understand the gravity of things, how serious it is, then, how can you take the proper measure? And so the double analogy. So on one hand, you have the idea of adultery, but it's also, in general, sin. And that's what he gets to these other things. I gotta look at number 6 in another translation. We got plenty of time for that. Good. In the day of our king, the princes have made him sick with bottles of wine. He stretched out his hand with scorners. They drink till they're drunken. And then what happens? People are drunk. They become often, right, friendly with people they shouldn't be. Like, you're all right. You're a scorner. You hate God. The idea of stretching out your hand implies joining hand, maybe not joining hands, but stretch out your hand with strangers, or is it two strangers? Whatever. But the idea is that I'm gonna say joining hands, though it doesn't. He joineth hands with strangers. They could have said that. Stretched out his hand with scorners. That's obviously an idiom. It's a word picture, right? In fact, even in the Devil's Translation, in the NIV, they call it. It says they join hands with the mockers, because it's the idea is that what it is. It's the picture of offering one's hand. You know what I mean? That he stretched out his hand with scorners, meaning mutually extending a hand to each other. That's how that would be a good. If you were going to truly go thought for thought, where you're going to translate this thought into English from that language, not ruining the idiom by saying they join hands with mockers. That's a different idiom. But scorners and the king have mutually extended the hand to each other. You know what I mean? Extend a hand. We have that, right? So that's stretched out the hand, is to extend the hand to someone. So they together have extended hands, reached out to each other. Because sometimes, booze can cause fights, but it also can cause a lot of palsy-walsy behavior. You know what I mean? Hey, you're a great guy, and, especially because you brought all this wine. Because people get drunk, and then their inhibitions and judgment go out the window, right? Let's remember all those sins, that there's also a spiritual component. They are drunken but not with wine, they stagger but not with strong drink, as it says in Isaiah 29. For the Lord has poured upon you the spirit of stupefaction. The prophets, the rulers, the seers hath he filled with the spirit of stupefaction, which is the spirit of sleep and of inebriation. And of course, in the book of Revelation, what do we see? The great whore herself, who's the ultimate vision of this adulterous nation, an adulterous people who go astray from God. She is drunken with the blood of saints. And so the king here is pictured as drunk with bottles of wine. A lot of times blood has a similar function. I even talked about, I said the Romans used blood spectacles to appease their people. And there is, what do they say? A lot of times, there's a lot of cynicism, like political leaders get into trouble and all of a sudden they start a war. That's the idea, is like, watch for the war. The launching, they're in political now, a lot of times, the funny thing is, political leaders are always in trouble. And so sometimes it is quite a coincidence. It's not a great coincidence that they also might come into some sort of conflict while also having some domestic trouble. I'm not a big, tail wag the dog kind of thing. I don't assume that that's always the case. But it's not that it's never been the case, right? In the day of our king, the princes have made him sick with bottles of wine. The other people, and the king is the ultimate leader, and underneath him there are the princes, other rulers within the ruling establishment. And they have encouraged him and made him sick by bringing him wine. Now you can see like a picture of that, the way, like, government officials a lot of times feed the king his information, right? And this can be either, yes, a king can become literally drunken, like Belteshazzar in the book of Daniel, who drank his drunken revelry out of the vessels of the house of the Lord. And that very night he saw the writing on the wall which said, Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin, numbered, weighed, and wanting. And so there is that literal aspect of it. But also, the information brought to a central ruler by other people he depends on can have a similar effect of blinding him. Because because they can deliver him only the good news they want him to hear. So he can become stupefied in a sense of he's not really sensitive to the situation as it truly exists. I'm saying this because it is not always just the face meaning that is meant in the prophets, especially. Because, the king might say, well, I never drink. And this is false. The prophet's false. But if the prophet has something else in mind, there's a deeper truth. The king doesn't even have to be drunk. It can be an analogy for the similar results of impaired judgment. And just impaired judgment is my main thing I'm thinking of. Because he's stretching out his hands with scorners. Or as it says in the, or a scorner is a mocker, someone who is not right with God, mocks God, or mocks authority, or mocks the things that ought not to be mocked. That's the idea, is that someone who is inclined to mock and to scorn just authority, righteousness. And righteousness, just authority is a nice, good, broad idea of the things that they hold in scorn. They hold righteousness in scorn and prefer iniquity and wickedness. And so having the wrong judgment will make you, make friends with the mammon of unrighteousness. Make friends with the unrighteousness of this world. For they have made ready their heart like an oven. And again, back to that analogy. Like, bringing in not just the analogy, but the adultery analogy. It's like they're horny for evil. To put a fine point on it. Or a blunt point on it, actually. Or not too fine a point. I think that's usually the understatement you say, right? To put not a fine point on it. I'm not sure. Fine point. Gee. Great English there. Great syntax. For they have made ready their heart like an oven while they lie in wait. Their baker sleeps all the night. That, I think, is a weird translation. Oh, yeah, their passion. That's right. I believe that's actually, the baker is, even in most translations, they're going to call, not just the NIV. I'm looking at, now I'm looking at the New American Standard. In fact, interesting, here in the New American Standard, I just want you to look at a few things when understanding this. And in the past, I didn't usually go to other translations, but it's one of the things I have on the table that's faster than just looking up. Well, I have words, but in the Hebrew, it's not like the Greek. I don't know. I feel a lot more comfortable with the meaning in Greek. Hebrew is a more alien language. But if you look at here, for their heart, and they say, in the day of our king, the princes have became sick with the heat of wine. On the day of our king, the princes became sick. Again, I still take nothing back I said, but it's that's a weird way to say it. The heat of wine instead of bottles. I do like that because, right, you become, if you've ever imbibed, which is, I don't recommend, but of course, obviously, there's that warmth that comes forth, right? When you drink, you feel like this warmth, and what it is actually a dulling of the senses. So you feel less the cool. But also it kind of burns going down, right? Alcohol. So that's back again. I just want to point out that close connection to the analogy. Here, they say, their anger smolders all the night. in the New American Standard. Baker appears to be a mistranslation, which I'm pretty sure is correct. I remember that baker there is a weird thing. Their baker burns all the night, you know. I think it's a related word. And so, because the prophet will sometimes do that, you know, like their baker burns all the night, and well, their baker kneads, and the faker, you know, bleeds. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of rhyming that goes on under the surface that I don't always point out. But I have a Bible where in the margins it will point out all the rhyming schemes that go on. And so sometimes the words are chosen because they rhyme with each other, or because there's alliteration, because the prophets were being clever with their language. And that doesn't carry forth into English, and so sometimes they use unusual words, like for passion. So their heart is they devour. They have made their heart like an oven while they lie in wait. Their baker sleepeth all the night. That's the American Standard. They went with their baker sleeps all the night too. And I'm curious. Let's go back to just the good old King James with the Strong's numbers, okay? And there you go. Yeah, Shen sleeping, to bake, to sleep, night. I don't know. I think they must be getting to trying to translate these thoughts. Afra to bake. Afra to bake. The baker. I'm guessing that word has more than one meaning. And I'm going to look in my more reliable source, which is my good old Bible. I just want to know because, though, like I said, I don't have to understand every scripture to be able to tell the truth. But the point is to help us understand the scripture, not just to tell truth. I could just get up here and just talk about Christian truth, like just off the cuff, right? Without necessarily referencing the scriptures. So let's see what my Bible says. The baker. Okay. See, their baker sleepeth, according to this note, says their anger smoketh. And here's why. Reading Yeshan Apem instead of Yeshan Opahem. And those don't think those pronunciations indicate any knowledge of Hebrew on my part. So Yeshan Apem instead of Yeshan Opem. Owing to the similarity in pronunciation in the ancient form of ayin and aleph, these letters were interchanged. The Masorah contains a list of words where aleph stands for ayin, and vice versa. The Aramaic and the Syriac preserve the reading of the primitive text. Their anger smoketh all the night like the oven, in verse 4. So again, like I said, the prophet was using similar sounding words according to that. As the previous verse, they're oven heated by the baker, right? And the bread is ready. I think it's interesting the baker sleeps all night and their anger smokes all night. Because honestly, I can see both meanings. It's funny because both things make sense. Why is the oven burning all night? Well, because the baker's asleep, you know. So that's a kind of an interesting thought. And he wakes up in the morning. The oven's on, the oven is hot, too hot. It's like Jesus says in the book of Revelation, right? I would thou wert cold or hot. Now, in that context, to be hot would be good because it means to be passionate about the things of God. Right? But in this context, it means to be passionate for sin. To be zealous to do evil. To be ready to do evil. To be ready to commit adultery. You know. Like when dogs are ovulating, they go into heat, as they call it. Heat. And I haven't observed a dog in heat, but I remember hearing about it, and you just get this idea that they are hot and ready, I guess, to participate in the mating thing. And the analogy here is they are hot and ready to participate in sin. And that's the thing, is that as Christians, that should not be us by any means. It's like sin should be something that is this regrettable, lingering thing in our lives that we are stamping out. I mean, that's should be our thought towards it, if there is lingering sin. Or it should be something that takes us unawares. Not something we've prepared our hearts to do. It's like, I've been thinking about it all day. I've been marinating my mind in adultery all day, right? And now I'm fully ready to go do it. I prepared myself to sin when I was younger. I mean, I would get ready. Think about when, getting excited to do drugs, getting ready to drink, preparing my heart all the day towards the end of what I was looking to do. And it's not like I'm looking forward. Now at the end of the day, I'm looking forward to going for a run and then going to bed. But my days were not always spent so. And so we want to be mindful we don't fall into that kind of a thing where our hearts are constantly being prepared like an oven, heated up, passions inflamed. And I do prefer, instead of anger smoking, I like the idea of passions. I know Bullinger said anger, but anger and passion are similar ideas. But it's like we've been using wine and stuff and stretching out their hands with scorners. I think it's passion for evil, scorn for God. They wake up all, like their heart's all ready and on fire on their bed. And they wake up in the morning and they have a blazing passion for wickedness. You know what I mean? You kind of, like they say, what do they say? You go lie down with dogs, you wake up with fleas. I guess the meaning that when you sleep, we go down to sleep with, you wake up with the next progression in the morning. You go down to bed with evil thoughts. The scriptures are written about this. He layeth on his bed and devises the evil he's going to do on the next day. This is what is done. For a lot of people who probably are conscientious Christians, it's kind of hard to think of. I know a lot of good people who lay in their beds and think about the nice things they want to do. They're not nice. I hate the word nice. But the righteous things they want to do. Or, just right, like get up and take care of my family. Or get up and do what needs to be done. Go to work. Earn a living. These are all righteous things you can think about. There's nothing unrighteous about working with your own hands. Or making a living to support yourself in this world, which you must do, or to do the Lord's work. I tell you what, I want to wake up with that passion. I want to go to bed and make my heart ready to seek the Lord. The analogy can be turned. It's what you're passionate about. While you lie in wait, while you lie in bed waiting, let your passion for the Lord smolder. In the morning, it's hot and ready to go. They are all hot as an oven and have devoured their judges. All their kings are fallen. There is none among them who calleth unto me. A cake not turned. I don't have time for this. Because it's like, a cake not turned is cooked on one side, raw on the other. The pancake's got to be flipped. It's not necessarily a pancake, but it's basically the same idea of like a pancake. Something that's been, you pour the batter on the stove, cook one side of it. If you try to cook it through like that, one side's going to be overdone, the other side's not going to be done. Or to get it done, you're going to have to burn the other side. They're meant to be flipped. I mean, there's got to be some sort of equity of, like we want to be well-rounded. So I'm going to hold off on verse 8. See if there's anything to say about verse 7. They are all hot as an oven, have devoured their judges. And I think about, I always go to our political thing in my mind as far as for examples in my mind to see how these things work politically. And the passion for sin, I mean, how did we get our wonderful marriage laws changed? Did someone pass a new law? No. No law was passed. In fact, they say, when they talk about the marriage issue, they say up until 5 minutes ago, everyone was against it. Everyone was against it. Even the people on the other side of the political spectrum were against it. Until suddenly everyone was for it. Everyone was like, isn't this wonderful? Why? Because the judges decided. That's how we got it. The judges decided. And then everyone was like, oh, okay, well, if the judges say so, then we're all for it. What kind of conviction did you have before? Did you just say it because you knew most people were against it? Just a political expediency, and now that's legal, and people didn't freak out. Now you're suddenly, oh, it's safe. Because they don't care about sin. They don't care about abomination. They don't care one whit. It's just like I said, the kings, all they care about are the people happy, and then I'm happy with their sin. I am glad. It makes me happy to see all that sinning, is what from the king's perspective, because he has no interest in it being any other way. And what is the idea? Well, what's that got to do with devouring judges? Well, there are judges, right? But the good ones, they've devoured. I don't know what the word, to eat. Yeah. They've eaten up their judges. It's like those who might judge righteously, the eating can be metaphorically thought of as eliminating, right? Eat up, consume. You know what I mean? Like that they are, they're gone. They've been eaten up. Or expended. You know what I mean? And the idea is an oven hot and ready for sin devour, the flame devours. By the way, that's a common thing. The flame devours. Flames eat. And so here's the idea. As a hot oven, as flames eat fuel, so the passion for sin that the people have eat up the judges. They become corrupted by the corruption of the people. The people become more and more corrupt, and so the judges become more and more corrupt. And so good men are not appointed to be judges. At least it becomes harder and harder for good men to be appointed judges. One of the things that, when they were appointing a judge a year or two, was it a year or two ago? I think it was last year. And they were very concerned. And one of the things that was making them so angry was the fear that he might not, and I don't think this was ever even a danger, honestly. I don't think he was going to do a thing about abortion. But that's what they were all saying. It's like, he's going to, they're so terrified he's going to take away the right to slay children in the womb. Oh God, that's the fear that he might, so And you know what? I don't think there's any danger of that happening. As much, and here's the thing. Good people have learned to be content. If we can just get someone who's not a horrible judge, we'll put up with someone who probably isn't ever going to do anything about the weird, because they'll say, well, it was long ago decided that killing babies was okay, so we're not going to step on that precedent. And I know that's the tradition, right? But then that's whatever. There was before that day there was a legal precedent that such a thing was an abomination. It was wicked to kill babies. It's like one of those, like even when they say, oh, what about the health of the mother? Well, it's like if it comes down to that, then it's like one of those, like you're in a boat and who do you throw overboard? It's like one of those horrible decisions people make, and obviously on that level, you don't want the state interfering when it's choosing between two lives. It's not for the state to decide. And see, I know women that be willing to give their life for their children. So I almost like it because it's up to me. I'm going to choose my wife over the unborn child. If it's a life for a life, if I know that, if it's one must die that the other shall live, I'm going to choose my wife. Sorry. But, on some level, I don't like the idea of like that she could choose, oh, I'll give up my life. No, I don't, that's something I would oppose. But anyways, so I mean, what I'm saying is like, yeah, the right to choose is like, they assume it means, oh, she'll choose to kill her baby. But anyways, my point is just this, that even good men are hamstringed by the passion for evil. You know what I mean? They feel like they have to bow before this evil that goes on in society. Oh, I won't do anything to interfere with your ability to do that. You know what I mean? I'm not going to change any of the crazy laws we have. It's not even a law. I can't even say a law we've enacted. It's like the decisions we've made about the law that made new laws out of nothing. I'm not going to do anything about that because that's precedent. The precedent is that we can just make things up, apparently. And we're going to uphold that. The ability to make things up. So that we can make things up in the future if we need to. It's crazy. But, and I look at it as the people's passion eats up the